If you watch my channel, you're used to the Legends of Runeterra content, the card game based on the League of Legends universe. Now, Legends of Runeterra does a great job of bringing these champions over and converting their background, lore, and abilities into a card. Now, I recently just got into playing League of Legends, and there are so many champions that I've yet to come into the game, so I want to design some custom cards for some of my favorite champions I've gotten to play. Today, starting with Yone, Karthus, and Mordekaiser. I hope you guys enjoy. Hey guys, how's it going? Jay Sensational here. Welcome back to the channel. So for today's video, I wanted to do something a little bit different and potentially the start of a sort of series if this is something that you guys find interesting or at least fun, because to me, I quite enjoy designing and thinking about custom cards. And this was definitely something that I kind of got into, and I designed a couple of champions. I got a few more in my back pocket, and definitely some more that I really want to do. So just let me know down below in the comments, or just, leave a like and whatnot. But today we will be covering my designs for Yone, Karthus, as well as Mordekaiser, starting with Yone. And I guess just a quick background into, I guess, what I did. If you guys don't know what these champions do in League of Legends, then there might be a little bit of a disconnect for any of you trying to watch this, but you can still enjoy it nonetheless if you guys do understand Legends of Runeterra. I will say that when designing these cards, I took a lot of focus in putting them as kind of just taking their character, what they do, and using that as the main focus of transitioning them into here. There are some cards that I think are a lot heavier focus on their abilities. Some are a lot heavier focus on their lore and kind of their unique focal points. But for, I think, these three cards in particular, they're a lot more focused on their specific unique abilities, as well as kind of just a little bit of their itsy bitsy lores here and there. But let's start with Yone. So Yone is, of course, Yasuo's brother. Once dead, now comes back as a sort of like a ghost hunter kind of dude. The lore's, I think the lore, he's alive, but he also died, so I'm not super clear on what he is. But my idea here is that I wanted him, of course, to be kind of similar to Yasuo in a sense, because they're both brothers. They both trained in a very they both trained under the same master, under the same school, and they both use very similar techniques. So I wanted him to be in a design that he is also a way to support Yasuo, but not completely bound by him. And so that's why I kind of gave him this sort of like 4-mana 4/4. That's a very, very keen nod to Yasuo himself. Now for him, he is a little bit unique. He has this whole like wanting to kind of kill and the Azakanas and really figure out what he is himself. And his abilities are really cool. He's able to kind of project his spirit and kind of detach himself from it, and he uses that to attack and things like that, and then he can come back into his spirit. And that's the main thing I wanted to kind of focus on, because I thought that was one part that was really unique about his character. And he does the similar like slashes, knockups, and things like that. So on his attack, he summons an attacking Unbound Soul with my stats, and then Yone recalls and then transforms into the Master of the Azakana here. So this is what I wanted to. I wanted him to focus on this sort of recall thing in a way that also helps him level up Yasuo, but also have an ability to synergize with the Ionian cards that already exist, things like Withdying Disciple, things like Mourn, things like Homecoming, and have some synergy points with the rest of the cards that exist. Now, I think the cool thing that he does here that I think I wanted to really capture in essence in his abilities is this ability to kind of project himself, come back, and have some extra bits here and there. So when he attacks, he essentially recalls himself, but he summons an attacking Unbound Soul, which has stats equal to his stats. And this says, when I kill an enemy, reduce the cost of Mass of the Azakana to 0 this round, which is the token that he generates. Now, I think what's really unique about this is that when Yone is summoned and attacked, he is essentially recalling in a similar way that Katarina does in Legends of Runeterra. And as most of you know, when you do play that Katarina, it is pretty lost in tempo. So I wanted to make sure that you had some aspect of catching back up on tempo, because I also wanted Yone to be a little bit more of a mid-rangey champion. So when he recalls, he becomes a 3-mana spell, so a lot less of an investment than a 4-mana unit, but an investment nonetheless. And because he is an investment, I wanted to give him a little bit of an upside. So if you are wanting to play out Yone from the Mask of the Azakana spell, you get a +2 health boost, very similar to the shield that he gets using his W ability. And I think where the interesting part is if you are able to kill a unit with the Unbound Soul, I reduce the cost of this to 0 this round. So you can essentially replay out Yone for free. Say you use a card like Sonic Wave, or use a card like Single Combat, or any sort of a strike spell, any sort of challenger spell, any vulnerable units, and you're able to kill the target that you're challenging or whatnot, you can simply replay out Yone this turn for free, and you just get a free recall. Potentially even use like the +2 health to use Single Combat or another strike spell to leverage on his bonus health, right? But if you want to just forego that and just play out a 4/6 Yone on your opponent's attack turn, you also kind of have the ability to do that. So I think there's a really interesting sort of mechanic here where it's like, do I attack with Yone to get the Mask of the Azakana to like trigger his recall, or do I save him because I'm not willing to take the tempo loss? And when he levels up, he kind of just forgoes his sort of downsides, which was mainly the recall, and he kind of comes in as a sort of Z/Ornn style of ability, where when he attacks, he simply summons an Unbound Soul with his stats, so he no longer recalls himself, but he also has the ability to recall his blockers. So if he quick attacks, he strikes into a unit. If it doesn't die, it recalls to hand. If it dies, well, it dies, which is, I think, is really is a nod to his ultimate, where he is able to have this attack, and then he has a knockback kind of combo thingy mobobber. I'm not going to say I fully understand his combos in League of Legends, but that is something that I kind of wanted to really touch up on, and also give him a quite nice sort of benefit or upside to his level up. And again, using the same sort of cards that synergize with his level 1. So if you have cards like Sonic Wave, if you use cards like the vulnerable cards, you can target the strongest unit and simply use that as a recall, or just use it to target because you're just a 4-mana 5/5 quick attack. So I think that when looking into the design here, it was really looking into something that all synergizes to Yasuo. You have the recalls, which helps it level up, but also have the ability to kind of, be able to build around him yourself, whether or not you just want like a kind of just strong mid-range champion. It's a little bit slower than Zed, but I think it has slightly higher upscale than Zed, and also has synergies that are separate from Zed, right? Zed is mainly used as an aggressive or ephemeral support champion, whereas Yone can be a little bit more mid-rangey. He has this ability to actually block in combat, and you can use him to pressure, use a recall against bigger unit-based decks. Now for his champion spell, Unbound Soul is, Mortal Steel. This is his strike spell. This is his Q, and this one was a little bit interesting because I did give Ione a strike card, which is something that Ione doesn't really have access to, so I wanted to make it quite expensive. But it does have a very similar effect to, if you guys remember the card Heroic Charge, one of the Bandle City spells that stuns an enemy if they survive being struck. This is sort of a mirror to that. An ally strikes an enemy. If it survives, recall it. So it's sort of like a Will of Ionia, or a very similar card, but it's weaker than that because it's 5 mana. But it also has a unique ability to actually recall a unit. But then, of course, the ally can die, and then it doesn't strike, and then it doesn't recall. So definitely a weaker card by design, but simply because Ione doesn't really have access to strike spells, I wanted to make it expensive just as a compensation for going against, I guess, region identities, or just what the card itself entails. But this is my attempt at Yone, and I really wanted to capture his abilities, especially his ability to project his soul. All right, next up we have Karthus. Karthus is a I don't know if he's a mage. I mean, I guess he's a mage by definition of like his class. But Karthus is definitely an interest. I read up on Karthus lore, and it's really interesting. He's this sort of like person who has been fascinated and has this obsession with death and finding like the people at the moment of their death. And eventually he journeys to the Shadow Isles and becomes gifted with the blessing of the Shadow Isles itself, and is able to grant the blessing of death onto whoever he chooses. And because I think that so much of his lore and background is surrounding this idea of death and dying, I wanted to design him around that aspect. So his level up is based off of how many units have died. I think something very similar to that is probably Maokai game, where it's allies or cards tossed. But this is overall just all units, friends, foes, allies, enemies, whatever units all count towards Karthus's level up. And of course, in Karthus in League, I think he's very everyone knows his ability to just like spam his Q. You have like the little like skill shot like Q on the ground, and that's kind of what is reflected on his card design. So Karthus is definitely aimed to be a little bit more of a control kind of card, but I can definitely see this being used in some more aggressive tools if you can get to the level up consistently. So what's really cool, what Karthus does is that at round start, he creates a Death's Blessing in hand. Death's Blessing is a slow mana fleeting spell that deals 2 to a unit. So just off the bat, card design wise, very similar to how Tahm Kench works, where he is able to generate a 2 mana acquired taste in hand. Now, Tahm Kench does that on summon, but Karthus does that on round start, because I was afraid that if I do summon and round start, he might be a little bit too effective in some sort of like tempo mid-range or aggressive deck. But overall, I think I don't know. When it comes to like designing cards, the balance is probably the aspect that I considered the least, although it was definitely something that I had in mind and very intentional when I designed some of these cards. But it's really hard to balance things around simply a champion, not even having like designed a package or a set of cards around him, and even just like, the overall idea of him in the game. But overall, Karthus is definitely this sort of more control-y card, and I want him to just be able to generate a removal turn after turn. Now, once 15 units have died, as a level 2 Karthus, he creates his Death's Requiem in hand, which is his ultimate that deals damage to all enemies. And this is a really big upgrade compared to Death's Blessing, because now all of a sudden this deals 2 damage to all to all enemies rather than just simply a unit. Still has the same fleeting and slow requirements, but one of the unique passives of Karthus is when he dies, he is still able to cast his abilities. And I wanted something to be able to reflect that or have some payoff for it. And so in this version, Karthus's Death Requiem also accelerates the fast if Karthus has died this round. I have made a slightly separate version of this card that I would also kind of like to showcase, but I'll do that after I finish Karthus's Defile. And this is, I think, one of his more interesting abilities. This is, I believe, his E, where he kind of like puts out this like field where any units or any champions or whatever you want to call it are within the field, they take damage, and if they die, they sort of he refills some mana. And in the sense of transitioning this sort of ability into a card, what I think is really interesting is because Shadow Isles already has so many different spells that do very similar things, right? You have Withering Wail compared to like Grasp of the Undying, compared to like Drained Soul, compared to like Withering Mist, compared to like Piercing Darkness. There's so many spells that do very, very similar things, and there's a lot more homogeny and a lot less room for actual design. So I definitely wanted to make this a little bit more unique in a way that I think was recognizable to being unique to Karthus, but also being something that you would see as a Shadow Isle spell. And so Karthus's Defile is a slow speed card that deals 1 to all units, so on a pretty similar power level as to Withering Wail, but the unique part is that it refills 1 spell mana for every unit that was killed, up to 3 spell mana, of course. So you can make this essentially a sort of 2 mana deal 1 to all if you kill 3 units. If you kill 2 units, it costs 3 mana, etc., etc. So it is a spell that can discount itself. It synergizes. Heck, it even synergizes with kegs now I think about it. But it has this ability to refill your spell mana, but it's without making it sort of like making it 2 mana, right? You can like make this 2 mana and just like aha, but it has a condition to fill. Its base cost is very similar to I think other removal aspects in the game, but it has a sort of upside if you are able to set it up. And of course it synergizes with Karthus himself, being able to damage your own units to work towards his level up. So I think while very simple in design, I think there is a decent. I put a lot of thought into it, and I think that putting some unique aspects of his abilities as a champion, while also making it, I think, not foreign to what you're used to in Legend of Runeterra, is a kind of nice spin on things as I approach this card. Now, as an alternative design to Karthus, I had keeping everything similar except for his level 2. So what I wanted to make a little bit more unique was looking further into his passive, where he actually gets some benefit from dying. And this is Karthus level 2 sort of reimagined, where now instead of round start, he creates the Death's Requiem. He creates a 0 cost Death's Blessing hand. But what I think is really cool is he acquires this last breath that creates Death's Requiem in hand. And now I buff Death's Requiem because now it's a little bit hard to get as a 3 mana deal 4 to all enemies. So very akin to, I would say, to something like Pack Your Bags, where now you're having this ability to set up your board state and then kind of blow up your opponent's board in one action and then swing in for a bunch of damage. And I think this definitely makes it a lot more unique because now you have this incentive to actually kill off your own Karthus. If you're building your deck in an aggressive way with a lot of self-sacrifice cards to level up Karthus, you play Karthus, you get some value of the Death's Blessing, and then you kill him on the turn you kind of want to go in and end the game. I think it's a super, super fascinating, interesting concept that pretty much no other champion really does. There's no champion in the game that you really want to kill in order to get some benefit, and with, some exceptions like Anivia, Tryndamere, but even those like, revive, those stay on the board, those have a second life. Whereas Karthus, you kill it, you get a game-ending card, and you decide that this is the turn that you're willing to sacrifice your Karthus in order to go in for a lethal swing. Because I think Karthus has two unique ways of building himself out. You can either build him as this slow controlling card, where, if you get this payoff because your opponent ends up killing your Karthus, well, now you have this like ultimate control trump card. But if you're playing this more aggressive, kill-oriented, self-kill, self-sacrifice kind of deck that Shadow Owl is definitely known for, you have this additional payoff where you're deciding which turn you want to kill your Karthus in order to have this swing turn where you're able to play Death's Requiem, kind of annihilate your opponent's board and kind of swing in, very similar to how Pack Your Bags in a Go Hard deck used to do. No, but this is my two different flavors of Karthus. If you guys want to give me your thoughts on either one of them, super happy to talk them through. But I thought this was a very unique sort of approach to Karthus, and I think a very unique way of designing a card in win condition in Legends of Runeterra as well. Now, finally, our last champion for today, we have Mordekaiser, the warlock that dies, comes back to life, and is this overall just absolute monster in both, I guess, the League of Legends history, being the founder of the Immortal Bastion, being just someone who's wanting to take over the world essentially, and he's this absolute beast as well. This huge metal colossus that is imbued with his soul and his essence and stuff like that. And I think one of the most unique things about Mordekaiser is obviously his ultimate, where he literally pulls someone into the Shadow Realm, and if he kills them, he kind of drains their stats. And that was definitely the aspect that I wanted to really, really take from him in making his design. So Mordekaiser is intended to be a game ender, or at least some way of design or a win condition. And I think that was the hardest thing to kind of figure out, because if you look at a card like Karthus, yeah, he's this mid-game unit that maybe leads to a win con, but he's mostly just there as a support to end of just controlling your opponent's board, or just getting some extra chip damage through, right? And then same with Yone, right? He's not necessarily, he can win the game sometimes, but he doesn't have to. He maybe just applies pressure, maybe helps you support some other things, gives you some recalls and things like that. But Mordekaiser, I really wanted to make him a win condition because he's this big, powerful kind of being. And so I made him expensive, and I wanted to really give him some impact when he came down onto the board. So at 7 mana, a 6/8 with Challenger and Spell Shield, on play, he obliterates an enemy unit and summons an alternate dimension in its place as a nod to his ultimate ability. And when he kills an enemy, he steals their stats, essentially. And his ability is essentially like Entomb, where it will summon a landmark in place, and if a certain condition is met, they'll be freed from the landmark. Now, instead of, a countdown to just resummon the unit, it actually does the opposite. If 2 countdowns are passed, and alternate dimension is still on the board, the unit inside just simply perishes. But on the flip side, if Mordekaiser is recalled or killed or leaves the board in any way, the alternate dimension crumbles and the unit is released. Now, I think balancing again, this card might be a little bit too strong at 7 mana. I'd probably bump this to like 8 mana at the very least. But I did want him to just have a really strong presence on board, just have an immediate effect, and have a way to like just really impact how the game goes. But I think at 7 mana is probably a little bit too strong into just unit-based decks. So putting him at 8 mana, I think just makes him a little bit more fair overall. But once he levels up by having 20 plus total stats, so every time he kills a unit, he gains those stats, right? So his power grows, his health grows, and once he gets to his level up, he has Overwhelm, and then when he kills, not only does he gain the stats, but also the keywords as well. I think from design perspective, the Overwhelm part is a little bit of a cop-out, just based off of how to design. Win conditions 101 give a big unit spell shield and overwhelm, but I think there is a decent amount in just capturing his essence of what he does that I think I'm pretty happy about, and this at least does make him an impactful game ender, similar to how like I think Scion felt when you jam him on turn 7 leveled. Now, of course, after I figured out that your opponent plays Scion on turn 7, and then you just obliterate it with Mordekaiser, all of a sudden that didn't feel so fair. So that's like where the balance comes in as you kind of think about these. So just imagine that the 7 is an 8, and I think that that's a little bit better. And then on a very similar scale of this sort of like draining your opponent's stats, I wanted to just further empower that with his champion spell, which keep in mind, a lot of the champion spells I've designed, or at least for the champions so far, have mostly been cards that do support the champion itself. So Yone has a recall and a strike. Karthus has a spell that kills or deals 1 to all units. And Mordekaiser has a sort of combat spell that does act as a way to sort of work towards his level up, or maybe just grant a trade. So Mordekaiser's Dark Will gives an enemy -1/-1 to give an ally +1/+1. So in a similar sense where Troll Chant gives -2 attack to +2 health, this gives -1/-1 to +1/+1, which is arguably stronger or weaker in some certain circumstances. But one thing that I do want to keep in mind is I don't want to have burst speed cards that kill units. So this spell cannot lower a unit's health below 1. But even if it doesn't like kill a unit, or say a unit has 1 health, it'll still just take away the 1 attack and it'll still give you the +1/+1. So that's sort of like out of the question. But I really didn't want this card to be able to kill a 1 health unit. I think that burst killing in this game is generally unfair at certain parts if it's not very expensive. But this is a nice way to sort of support Mordekaiser. Maybe you just want to give him +2 extra stats at the end of a turn to kind of just get to that level up. Maybe this gives you a value trade. Maybe this gives you a way to just have an ability to challenge with Mordekaiser to flip him. But otherwise, it just acts as a little bit of a support to him. But definitely the main focus, again, is his obliterate, his dragging into the realm, and this sort of like battle between your opponent and you to either kill Mordekaiser before the alternate dimension is counted down, or they succumb to Mordekaiser's big stats and eventually as a way to end the game overall. But that's my approach to these 3 champions. Hope you guys enjoyed some of these cards, or these champions put into card form into Legends of Runeterra. If you guys actually kind of like this content, I would very much appreciate if you let me know, because I did put a decent amount of effort into this. And if you have any feedback on it, because I do actually like making some of these cards, I would, if you guys want a little bit of a series from these, or some champions you would like to see, then that's something that I'm also kind of keen to do so. But let me know. Thank you guys for tuning into the channel today. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys later.